Hello and welcome to ABP Live. I have with me today a very special guest. He is Mr. A.S. Bhasin. He's India's leading chronicler on India's foreign policy, have been there with the Ministry of External Affairs for more than 3 decades, archiving some of the historical milestones that this country has had. Today we are going to discuss his new book. He's had written several books, but this is the new book, Negotiating India's Landmark Agreements. Now, this book talks about 5 key pacts, which really gives a picture of how India's foreign policy has evolved from 1947 till 2008, but it also gives you a picture of how the contemporary time that we are living in has shaped up. Welcome to ABP Live, sir, and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you, madam, for your very generous words. And, I am also grateful to you for organizing this talk on my book, which I hope will have a wider audience and will have an impact on the people's understanding of foreign policy issues.
Thank you very much, sir. Of course, this is going to be, I'm sure it will reach wider audience, and especially the youngsters need to read this, who rely these days on social media more on understanding India's foreign policy than understanding these agreements. So to begin with, sir, I'll first start with some of the key pacts that you have talked about. And now, of course, when we talk about agreements, the first thing that comes in our mind is that what we did with our neighbors. And now that Prime Minister is going to Sri Lanka in a few days, you have extensively written about the India-Sri Lanka agreement, right? And on that, the main issue was the Tamil reconciliation issue. Today, we see that India is wanting to have Sri Lanka in its strategic sort of embrace. And there is probably an understanding that maybe the Tamilian issue, Sri Lanka sees it as India's interference, maybe. And they want to see this and deal with this as their internal affair. So over the years, how do you see these dynamics have changed?
Well, you see, initially we had a very correct policy of leaving this Tamil issue to the Sri Lankan government to handle. It was an internal problem, domestic problem between the Sinalas, who were 74%, and Tamils, who were 12% something. Actually, it was the superciliousness of the Tamils to ask for parity of being 12% only of the total population vis-a-vis 74% Allah, equality of language, and also in the process asking for a homeland by joining the two northern provinces, east and west, which had dominantly Tamil population. This concept of homeland is repugnant to the basic tenets of what you call nation state. And naturally, the Sri Lankan government was in denial or did not even willing to consider this, because this concept was totally against the concept, as I said, of nation state. But later on, Mrs. Gandhi chose to intervene and started training the Tamils in India, giving them training, giving them instrument for terrorism,
Correct.
and allowing them to operate from India.
Okay.
This brought us deeper into the internal politics of Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lankan government was willing to accommodate the Tamils to some extent, but not to the extent that they had asked for. There was either this or nothing. In fact, the militants among the Tamils, and particularly the LTTs, their agenda was Elam. Elam was freedom, independence. And in fact, in 1986-87, they had succeeded in establishing a sort of state, not sovereign, but you can say semi-autonomous in northern province, where the writ of the Sri Lankan government did not run. It was entirely managed by the Tamils, and Sri Lankan army was not able to dislodge them. What the Tamils did, Sri Lanka did, was to put a sort of economic blockade so that there will be shortages, they won't be able to get anything from abroad, and there will be shortages and they will ask for talks.
Correct.
Particularly petrol, because without petrol, they said, how will they run the government? Today, government, you can't run without petrol. India unnecessarily intervened.
Okay.
So much so that we told the Sri Lankans that we will like to send essential items to the people there by boats, and they will deliver these things to the Tamils. Sri Lankan point was there is no shortage. If you want to send them, give it to our Red Cross and they will distribute it among the people whom you decide, whom you want.
Right.
But we did not agree, and against the wishes of the Sri Lankan government, these boats were sent. But they were not allowed to land and deliver the goods. They came back. I think India at that time was very upset that a small nation has been able to defy a big nation.
Correct.
And that day we decided to airdrop these, which was rather, I would say, unfortunate. It was not breaching their sovereignty. Not only they were internal interference, but you are also breaching their sovereignty.
Right.
And this also naturally created panic among the small neighbors. You know, India is surrounded by countries which are all small in size vis-a-vis India. And naturally, they are aware of the size and resources of India. So today what happens? All these countries look up to China. They feel cozy in the company of China because they think China is able to keep India under check.
Sir, if I can ask you, since you have not only spoken about the agreements, you have also given the background, the history that led to signing of these agreements. But since you said that this was, India unnecessarily intervened, also the deployment of IPKF in Sri Lanka, do you think that continues to bother Sri Lankans even today? Because you spoke about them tilting towards China. Is that also a factor that historical, that legacy or that feeling is still in them that India will invade us?
Well, that feeling will never go away. That feeling will never go away that India had not only interfered but also introduced army, which became ultimately to the advantage of neither Sri Lanka nor of the Tamils. The introduction of IPKF was to nobody's advantage. It was unnecessary intervention. Sri Lanka, what was the India undertook to do? That they will disarm the Tamils, whom they were helping until yesterday. And since we failed to disarm them, Sri Lanka said, what have you done? You have done nothing. So please go. Then, in the quick of luck, the Tamils LTT and the new president, Rana Singha Premadasa, they decided to come together and said, look, we are people of the same country, let us make peace. So there will be no need for IPKF. And they decided to make peace. LTT were pretending to make peace, but nevertheless was wanting to make peace. And now, Sri Lanka said, look, we have no problem. You please go. So this problem was created unnecessarily, which has left a long-term impact. And Sri Lanka will never forget it.
That's a very valid point, sir. Now coming to the India-China agreement on Tibet of 1954, which you have so meticulously given every single details of it. Now again, I will bring you back, bring you in the sense towards the contemporary times. We all know the India-China history, the 62 war and then the series of border skirmishes, the latest being the Galwan clash, which again saw bloodshed. But now we are again seeing India and China, creating some kind of resetting of ties. But do you really feel that if you have to settle the border issue between India and China, you really need to make Tibet one of the stakeholders?
No. Tibet has no role in India-China problem.
Okay.
Tibet is finished case, as far as I can say. It is problem between India and China, in which Tibet doesn't play any role.
Okay. But how do you then address the question of, the existence of Dalai Lama? Now his reincarnation debate is going on. The settlement of the Tibetan government in exile in India. How do you address those concerns?
The Tibetan exile government is a misnomer.
Okay.
Who recognizes them as government? Even India doesn't recognize them. They are there, undoubtedly. But tell me, any government in the world has ever recognized the Tibetan government? It is a misnomer. Number one. Number two, Dalai Lama's value lies in his incarnation.
Okay.
If he appoints anybody, then somebody will say, why he, why not me? Value lies in his incarnation. And incarnation will be found after he dies. Now, when he dies, which he has to, like any other human being, an incarnation will have to be found. He will be 1 or 2 years old, 3 years old at the most. He will need 15, 16 years of education to attain the status of Dalai Lama, to be able to preach or to be able to do justice to his office. Do you think people will have time or people will remember 15, 16 years? The Dalai Lama who is sitting as a refugee in a corner of India? People will forget Dalai Lama. In my opinion, I may be wrong.
No, of course.
But as far as I think, if the old system is followed, a Dalai Lama is found as incarnation after the death of the current Dalai Lama. He will need long time, 60, 70 years. And new generation of even Tibetan children would have come. Many of them would have settled. Probably even if you today, this problem is settled, let us say, supposedly, do you think all the Tibetans will go back? Hardly. A fraction will go, not all.
Good that you spoke about that, sir, because that was my next question. How do you see then this problem sort of, being a kind of point of tension between India and China? Because Dalai Lama says his next reincarnation will be outside of China. China says they have already sort of selected somebody. And then there is this new generation of Tibetans who were born in India and they were raised in India, but then they visualize of going back to Tibet someday. So how do you think India will address this question in the future, in the absence of Dalai Lama?
I don't think India has any role to play in that. India will, I think, observe what is happening among the Tibetans, how this Dalai Lama is chosen or not chosen, and if chosen, how he is brought up. India has to simply watch. India has to do nothing. Chinese will create a Dalai Lama if they need one in their own within Tibet and give him the importance. And people there will not know anything about the Dalai Lama here. This problem, in my opinion, will resolve itself.
Okay. Because coming to your book, sir, how you have given that entire history with the way the British first wanted to go along with the Chinese and then they went against, and they also sort of never recognized Tibet, so to say. But then the problem is, if I can ask you that question, since you have so extensively researched it and also you have, dealt with it, do you think the India-China boundary question can ever be then settled? How long can this continue?
It's a very difficult question you have asked. I think if both the countries stand on the position as they have taken now, there is no chance. Both have to reside. Chinese, I think the 1960 formula of Chow and Lai was the best alternative and the best solution.
Okay.
That India retains this eastern sector, McMahon Line area, and India recognizes Chinese ownership or occupation in the western sector. That was the best possible solution of the problem. But India, unfortunately, did not agree in 1960. Today, the Chinese claim not only western sector, but also the eastern sector. So the demand has doubled. That formula is no longer acceptable to them. Since it is not acceptable to them, India cannot give up its right in the
Right.
eastern sector. It is that area which was earlier a sort of agency is now a state. And they are the citizens of India, the people of the said state. How can India give away citizens of India in any settlement? So, if no solution is found, the present borders will by default become the long-term borders of the two countries.
Correct. But again, China says we don't recognize the line of actual control and they keep pushing. And
Where is the line of actual control? Actual control line has to be recognized by both.
right.
It has to be done by the consent of both the countries. We do our line, the Chinese do their line.
Correct.
See, they have their own line of actual control, we have our. It's a line of perception. I was there, no say I was here. Who decide who was there? In 1962, after the ceasefire, Chomila had suggested to Nehru, please send your people to meet my people, army officers, so that a demilitarized zone is created. And the points where checkposts of the two countries can be established by agreement. If that had been done, Nehru did not accept it. If that had been done, then we would have a zone demilitarized with agreed points on where the checkposts are located. So that would have been line of actual control. We did not agree, so there's no line of control. We think this is the line of control where we are, they think no, this is the line of control. So both are talking of LAC, but nobody knows where it is.
Where is the
So
LAC?
people are confused.
And then sort of this will, probably will continue, as you said, the present understanding will probably become a default.
It will become by default the border between two countries, the present situation. But we are not going to give up Arunachal Pradesh. And they are not going to give up their right, at least claim as they are today. They want us to vacate that area, we cannot.
Right.
And if they do not resign from their position and say we accept the old formula of Chauvelin, that is area where settlement is possible. I would say possible. If India maintains the old position, no, this is also our source, then even there will be no solution.
Correct.
India has to understand.
Sir, and also now if I can ask you, shift your focus little towards the US, which is now grabbing headlines for, the reasons. President Trump and his liberation and his tariffs and constant threat of reciprocal tariffs. But coming to the civil nuclear deal, which you have written so extensively about, and it really gives a clearer picture to the present generation who are not aware how really the strategic bonhomie started. How do you see, now from the present day perspective, do you think this nuclear deal, at the risk at which at that time Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh signed it, was the risk worth taking? Because his government came under threat, of course, from the left parties. Do you think that nuclear deal agreement really sort of helped India get that strategic leap, so to say?
First of all, there was no threat to the government because government had ensured alternative support before signing it.
Yes.
So there was no threat as such. As far as the agreement goes, it has been the best agreement that India signed. Though it has been lying dormant for quite some time, but recent developments give its old importance. It revives its importance.
Right.
This is a very major development which has taken place last few days, where a company based in America has been allowed to set up, help India in the building of small nuclear weapons.
Reactors.
This is a great development. And similarly, Biden, before demitting office, had signed certain papers which earlier forbade India from certain activities. Though no big nuclear reactor has been set up, but it was not only about the reactor, it was about the nuclear technology, reprocessing of the spent fuel. So many things were involved. And all those things happened. What did not happen was establishment of the large nuclear reactors. But that is not a very, very important thing.
Yeah,
In the
that's what. The
meantime,
commercial aspect was not really the focus.
yeah. And secondly, in the meantime, India had also laid stress on solar energy.
Right.
A lot of solar energy was created and planned. So therefore, reactors by itself were not the sole purpose of the agreement. It's a much more, as I said, technology, reprocessing of the spent fuel, dual use items for economic and political
And the defense
development.
partnership and many other things.
Oh, so many. And the present relations would not have been possible without that agreement. That agreement, which withdrew the various restraints which were there on India, were removed.
Correct.
And the relationship that we have now with China developed only after that.
Yeah. The nuclear isolation sort of went away.
Not only nuclear isolation, but in all every department. Because since 1974, when we first exported our so-called peaceful nuclear device, we were under sanctions. Not only from America, but also from the nuclear suppliers group. No country was cooperating with us on these items. So with the signing of the agreement then, in 2008, all those restrictions were removed.
Absolutely.
And what was not removed, some technical problem, have since been removed.
Removed.
And the agreement is very much now in news and probably delivering its results much more emphatically than ever time before.
Correct. But sir, you also give a lot of credit to the work that was done by Prime Minister Vajpayee on getting the nuclear deal signed. If you can tell our readers, how that sort of paved the way for
No, he has started the process.
the next step.
The next step.
Strategic partnership.
But there was not much opportunity because that was the beginning. He made the beginning, you can say. But unfortunately, the BJP after that went into denial. Just to see, it was
But
not
now they're sort of saying
it
that
was not a policy denial or they thought that it was against India's interest. It was because they didn't want to cooperate with the ruling party. That is the unfortunate part of our political system. Whatever the policies, the opposition must oppose them.
But today the BJP says that, it was because of Prime Minister Vajpayee the deal was signed. So
Because they would not like to give credit to Manmohan Singh. Therefore, Vajpayee becomes Andy.
So that sort of will continue, sir. And now coming to the last aspect, and which I think is huge, but on the India-Russia, the India-Soviet agreement, when the USSR sort of collapsed and Russia came into being, how do you see that dynamics, right? Very less is known about that agreement. And there is this understanding that when it became Russia, the agreement sort of ceased to exist. In today's point of view, how do you see that?
No, as for the agreement of August 1971 is concerned, it ceased to exist in February 1972. While you are talking of today, you see what happened. In February, first of all, India did not want to sign that treaty. They tried their best. There was a need for some sort of understanding with Soviet Union to keep China out of the inevitable war between India and Pakistan. So India asked Soviet Union, you kindly issue a statement which will keep the Chinese out in our problem. Soviets said, no, you have to sign the treaty. And we had to sign it, and we signed it. That was in August 1971. In February 1972, after the war was over and Bangladesh had been created, D.P. Dhar, who was earlier ambassador in Moscow,
Yes.
and now chairman of the Policy Planning Committee in the MEA, he, along with General Manekshaw, went to Moscow with a list of equipment and various other things that were required for replenish the losses in the war.
In the war.
military hardware and all that. Now the Soviet said, well, fine, but forget about Pakistan. Pakistan is nothing. You have a problem with China. We have a problem with China. We need you against China and you need us against China. Let us have a treaty against China specifically so that we could help each other. D.P. Dhar made a very valid point that we had signed a treaty only a few months ago, which is valid for next 20 years. And if ever there's a problem, we can always invoke that treaty and be helpful to each other. But Moscow said, no, you have to sign another treaty. Forget that treaty, which D.P. Dhar was not prepared. And what was the result? Marshal Greshko said, a list where you have given me, take them back and go back home. Nothing is available. And they refused to give anything. And they went empty-handed. Then after some time, Swaran Singh came as a follow-up. But they also made him some promise, but didn't any actual delivery took place. Finally, Mrs. Gandhi wrote to Brezhnev, and then some action was taken. They were so upset by our refusing to sign a specific treaty against China.
Right.
So this came to an end. The 1971 August Treaty had come to an end in February 1972.
Correct.
So it never was invoked either by us or by the Soviet Union as long as it existed. Never was invoked again.
If I can ask you on the India-Simla agreement, do you think that Pakistan still believes in it? And my second part of the question, if you can tell our viewers on what happened with Indira Gandhi at that time during the signing on the issue of Kashmir. That always comes up.
First of all, Pakistan doesn't stand by Kashmir, the Simla agreement then or now.
Okay.
Immediately after signing it and after having got there all people released, prisoners of war released, and got the territories in the western sector also back, they just went back on everything. So the agreement, Shimla agreement, ceased to exist practically immediately after
it was signed.
within 1 or 2 years of the agreement of being signed. The Kashmir issue was there, but Bhutto was not willing to discuss it elaborately because he thought if he signs any agreement about the Kashmir at Shimla, it will be looked at under duress because they were a defeated nation. When he was reminded by the Foreign Secretary that earlier at Tashkent, you were yourself said you were willing to sort out the problem on this basis. What is your problem today? I was not at that time defeated like I am defeated now.
Very true.
I am today a defeated nation. And as a defeated nation, anything I sign on Kashmir will look to have been signed under duress. And that will create problem for me back home.
Right.
So therefore, he said, I agree to this line of control. Actually, it used to be called ceasefire line.
Ceasefire line.
And then it was agreed to call it LOC, line of control. I agree that this is the best solution. You keep what you have, we keep what we have. But I can't agree to it now. So this was the general understanding which is written nowhere.
Correct.
Which is perceived to have been
but it has not been recorded.
But it has not been recorded. As I said in the book also, on the last day of their stay here, that is night of 2nd July, there was a meeting between Bhutto and Mrs. Gandhi to sort out this problem so that agreement could be signed. The agreement was signed following this talk, but what was talked, nobody knows.
Very true.
She briefed as she came out both Principal Secretary Aksar and our Secretary P.N. Dhar. It was a duty of either of them or both of them to have recorded what they were told by the Prime Minister. But they did not. Why? I can't say.
Okay.
It was just by default or whatever it happened, I really don't know. And this not being recorded means until now we don't know, and the Pakistanis say there is no such evidence, there is no such decision made. If there is one, please show us, and we have nothing to show.
But do you think this was done deliberately, sir?
I cannot say. I don't think it was done deliberately. I would say maybe Aksar thought it is understood, not very necessary. Maybe it was midnight and the next day they thought it was not important. That meeting took place almost midnight. And the agreement was signed, though dated 2nd July, actually it was signed on 3rd morning. It continued to be dated 2nd July. Maybe at next morning, in the busy schedule of these people, they lost sight of it.
Probably, and they thought it
I
maybe
wouldn't
won't be
say it
important.
could be deliberate, but I would say by default.
Sir, so before wrapping up, since you have seen history for so long and you're now essentially, one can really call you a historian, how do you see the present India-Pakistan relationship? Now we know under the Narendra Modi government, the decision is terror and talks cannot go together. But do you think can we afford not to talk to Pakistan, or how do you see
See,
this?
we have talked and talked and talked all the years. What has come out? There has been talk at Prime Minister level, there has been talk at Foreign Minister level, there has been talk at Secretary level, there has been talks on delegation level.
Of course, at the army
At
level.
every level we have talked. What did come out of it? Zero. So what will happen again? It will create some expectation, some goody-goody for some time. And then again there will be disappointment. Well, unless Pakistan agrees to settle the problem. Now India has taken the position, as you would see from the statement of our Foreign Minister Jaishankar, that Pakistan is sitting on Kashmir for since 1948.
Yeah, now we are sort
And
of.
we want, this is illegal and we want it back. If that is our stand, and you can well imagine what is the solution that is possible. So this will go on like that, unfortunately. And talk or no talk are not going to result in any particular thing. Unless mindset is changed. Pakistan has paid a very, very heavy price for sticking to the Kashmir issue and creating a problem for themselves. If they settled it on the LOC or on the what you call ceasefire line, which was offered to it by Pandit Nehru in 1948, even when the war was going on, Nehru said, you keep what you have grabbed and stop the fight. In 1953, there were talks between Nehru and Muhammad Ali, Pakistan Prime Minister, and it was again offered, same solution. At various levels, in 1960, when Indus Treaty was signed, and Nehru had gone to Pakistan, he had offered then also. In Swaran Singh Bhutto talks in 1962-63, this offer was repeated. But Pakistan never accepted it. So where is the solution possible? Where is the meeting point between two countries?
So then that kind of compels me to ask you this question, and you can choose to, answer it. In the fact that, do you see then between India and Pakistan, war is the only solution? Because now when we are talking about taking back Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that's the only solution, right? Through which you
Well,
can
we are
get it.
talking and they are also talking. And we go on talking.
Sure.
Talking doesn't cost.
That's what. Well, thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful, discussion with us. So we were discussing the book. Let me show this to you again, Negotiating India's Landmark Agreements by Mr. Bhasin, and you need to take this and also take a copy and understand that today, when India is having this key relationship in its immediate neighborhood and beyond, what really was the history since 1947. For ABP Live, this is Nayanima. Basu. With me on camera is Sanchit.